Part 15. Remembering the 15-part integration of the sacred union masculine and feminine principles. The storyline of the Isis and Osiris mystery cult is simple and quite instructive. There are 9 godheads in the primary Egyptian pantheon known as the Ennead. Anu sits at the top of the Council of 9. Below him are 2 sets of brother-sister twins that embody the physical earth in its primordial elements, earth, air, fire, and water. Out of these emerge another 2 sets of brother-sister twins, representing the polarity of dark and light in the false light matrix of the hologram containment field. These are Isis and Osiris on the light side, from whom emerges the prodigal son, Horus, who rises in the east at the horizon. Set and Nephthys counter the light as it is extinguished on the western horizon by Set, as he removes the light of the day at sunset and gives it over to his sister/wife to cover the night, light and dark, black and white, the never-ending polarity displayed for all to see on every Masonic temple floor in Westminster Abbey, and many more. Of course, the maintenance of the polarity and the control of the feminine and masculine are not just on the floors of the churches. The design of classical cathedrals is very precise and symbolic. The entrance, with its Vesica Pisces fluted shape, is representative of the female genitalia into which the people penetrate, as if being thrust into the interior as so many seeds to fertilize the mother church, with new beings to be bonded, baptized, communed, and confirmed. Here to the right we see this in perfect symmetry with the 2 pillars on the Washington, D.C. National Cathedral, with the vaginal entrance on the bottom and the all-seeing eye on the top. Now let's have a look at the book of Genesis, wherein the fall of man occurs as a result of eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That fruit is the polarity in our minds that splits us into the internal schism that projects outward the false precepts of good versus evil, dark versus light, male versus female, all of which comprise the false light matrix and posit the false dialectical war between light and dark. This is the fruit we have eaten, and has nothing to do with sin or deities or anything else. The 2 pillars that are manifest on the world screen that control humanity through the priest and king are our own projections of the internal polarity, our own fall from our original unity consciousness. Taking full responsibility for such is the first step to achieving full power within ourselves and thus having the power to transform that which we have created. Anything other than that simply puts us in the position of the victim and others as the perpetrator, thus giving them our power through our own self-induced disempowerment. As we discussed before, in the storyline, Set dismembers Osiris into 15 parts. Many restatements of this myth on the internet say it was only 14, and some say even 13 parts. That is not accurate. The body has 14 major articulations, wrists, elbows, shoulders, and ankles, knees, hips, times 2 equals 12. With the waist and neck, the total is 14. On the male body, archetypally represented by Osiris, there is a 15th part, the phallus. The entire body was disarticulated into 15 parts, 14 of which were found by Isis upon her return, but it is the 15th part, the phallus, symbolically and energetically representing the masculine principle, the directive capacity of sovereign free will, that is never found again. Isis returns and retrieves the other 14 parts to reconstruct her husband and must raise an artificial phallus to impregnate herself and subsequently give birth to Horus, the prodigal rising sun as the sun rises on the horizon. Instead of the natural regenerative masculine force, the artificial control mechanism of the obelisk as the artificial phallus is placed in specific geomantic locations throughout the world to establish the singularity of dominance and control. Yet more importantly, it is the splitting and polarization of that masculine principle within humanity, regardless of gender, that is what is key in our concern. It is that self-directive principle as sovereign free will that is split, polarized, castrated, and made ineffectual, which has become the dominant energetic mechanism that has controlled the human race and its creator capacities for eons of time. Out of that energetic, symbolic, and literal castration and disempowerment emerges the rage that turns to violence and war, as demonstrated in the archetypal myth of the castration of the father by Kronos, that creates the fates and the furies, the bondage and the rage that leads humanity into endless wars. In the final phase of the march to complete world domination, we have the scene set on the world stage by the raising of the two pillars as the Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan. Many have uncovered the preponderance of numerological coincidences on the date of September 11, 2001, indicating premeditated intent to align with the esoteric requirements of that event. For our purposes here, the key point is to see this as an orchestrated archetypal event as the defining moment in the millennial process of completing the final lockdown of this world. This can be seen as the collapsing of the two pillars and the merger of the king and priest, to be embodied into the singularity as now resurrected by the New World phallus and PowerPoint, from which the empire shall reign eternally in their intended one-world order. Notice the two flanking buildings of equal height, like two testicles with the phallus in the middle, and one of those buildings having a pyramid shape on the top with its masculine angles and pointed apex, while the other one has a domed, rounded shape with a feminine aspect. This also shows the hidden meaning behind the H and arrow of the 2016 presidential campaign. It was about the arrow pointing the way for the collapse of the two pillars into the singularity of the one world order. Ultimately, this is about the subjugation of the sacred feminine principle of true creation that has been hardwired in all of the major symbols, names, constructs, archetypes, and esoterica over thousands of years. We have only briefly touched on a few of the primary elements of that historical process. Concurrently, of course, is the castration of the sacred masculine of true fecundity and the ability to bring egg and seed together to bring forth life in its myriad expressions of manifestation. This is symbolized in the Genesis story of Abram, the servant of Ra, establishing the covenant to bond his seed and become the priest-king of Jerusalem. The original peoples in that area were stewards of a significant creation point from which the earth flowed forth its fecundity and life creation. This was later aligned with a global overlay mapping that placed the 33rd degree parallel of latitude and the 33rd degree meridian of longitude in that much fought-over speck of sand in the Palestine desert, with obvious reference to the 33 degrees of masonry. It is all about the projection of our own internal disempowerment onto the holographic screen of this reality that has been superimposed by the artificial constructs of some binary god in the ethers as hardwired through the methodologies of esoteric patterns, codes, numerology, astrological movements of stars, moon, and sun, and much more. This is why the elite and their bloodlines and religions have such an overarching preoccupation with these things of esoterica, as they are the means by which they align with and attain the power through their absolute obeisance to such an artificial godhead that has given them the power to rule over this realm for so long. And yet, it is we who have disempowered ourselves by our own diminishment of our true capacities, in the allowance of the castration and dismemberment of the true light of our beings within, and the desolation, violence, and destruction via the engines of war in every form imaginable that has laid to waste this beautiful, rare, and unique orb that we should be nurturing, preserving, and protecting as our own creative home. This collapse of the two into the false one is being orchestrated in an entirely other context, hidden from view from the population except by those with eyes to see and the ability to connect the pieces of the vast multi-dimensional jigsaw puzzle being constructed in our world through time and space. This is the collapsing of the two lines discussed that began with Otto the Great in 962 A.D. with the creation of the First Reich, or Empire. This included the agreement that the lineage of the king would proceed as the Holy Roman Emperor and that of the priest as the Pope and Papacy of the Holy See. At the end of time, these two would become as one, and that one would be seated on the world's throne in Jerusalem, in the embodiment of the new priest-king, forever suppressing life and the true balance of the feminine and masculine principles in the world. If one traces the progression of events in the 20th century, this is easy enough to see. Key to this progression, though, is the timeline as it relates to the Vatican's movement in taking control of Jerusalem and its intentions to build its world throne in that place. Such things as Israel legislating to give the Church full legal personality, to give it legal person status, i.e. juristic personality, is one such thread in the fabric of this intention. Another is the fundamental agreement signed by the Vatican and Israel on December 30, 1933. The final purpose of this is to establish the complete hegemony over the old city of Jerusalem. It was reported by one very serious researcher into the depths of what was really going on with Israel, and as it relates to this particular component, that once these agreements were in place, the Vatican began developing its intentions to build a perfect recreation of the original castle built by Otto the Great in celebration after the signing of the accord, putting him in the position of Holy Roman Emperor. Many years ago, this author read an article by Barry Chamish stating the purpose of this recreated castle was to build the intended seat and world throne in the completion of the collapse of the two lineages into the singular authority for complete world control. Unfortunately, that article was never saved and has proved very difficult to find again, and equally unfortunate, Barry Chamish has since died and so is not available for any contact or to continue his important work. If any reader comes across this article or specific reference to this point, please let us know so that we can update this item and link it to the source. Whether this last point is true or not, it remains obvious that the intention is to control that paramount location in a conclusion of the esoteric fulfillment as represented by the many details discussed herein, and the many more to be found if one chooses to look and pierce through the veils of obfuscation, disinformation, and lies. But as important as all of this historical and esoteric information might be to achieve clarity and understanding about the world system and how we got where we are today, what supersedes this context is that there is now unfolding in this world a more important process where two are becoming one in the truest sense. The points discussed above are the artificial construct that has been overlaid in this reality for thousands of years, but it is the same old story. It is nothing more than the obfuscation and attempt to obliterate the true balance that exists between the feminine and masculine principles of which we are made. It is an artificial mirrored reflection of our true nature, used for control and domination. We know what these principles are, and we know how to embody and integrate them. Our ability to align with creation and balance the components of our being and our spirit with the materia mater as the substance of this world is what we are now returning to in our journey back home. It is not out there. It is right here in this world that such a journey is taking place and will be completed. Once done, we will never allow the sort of thing that we have discussed in this document to occur again. We will be free to journey wherever we choose, not as some mechanical toy of a technological god, but by our own inner unity and presence from which true creation always emerges. We will be free to create as we wish and direct. We have for too long allowed our gaze to be entrained away from ourselves. It is time to journey within, to find this true balance in ourselves. These false gods of the matrix and all their purported power are but mere phantoms compared to our own inner powers, capacities, and qualities of creation. It is time to wake up to that fact.